Hi, I'm Adrian. Welcome to my channel. And in this video, I'd like to go over the 4 standard Randonneuring distances that will get you the Super Randonneer title as well as qualification for the longer, more advanced rides. So before we begin, let me just do something. Alright, so let's start off with 200 kilometers. That's the easiest, shortest distance that you can go in order to qualify for longer, more advanced rides. So the standard cut-off time for a 200 kilometer brevet is 13.5 hours. That's plenty of time for you to finish the ride, especially if you already have experience in long distance events and don't dally and don't spend too much time wasted on things like, resting and whatever. But I have to say that Randonneuring is not a race. You don't get anything special from completing the ride fast. So as long as you complete the ride in 13.5 hours, you have completed successfully. Now, having said that, I know there is still the good feels, of completing or being the first to complete a ride. But besides that, unless you are really going for speed and you are really confident in your ability, expect the ride to take about maybe say 8 to 12 hours. Maybe shorter if you are fast and longer if you like to take your time, or if the route is particularly hard or lumpy, lots of elevation. But that aside, there's nothing really special that I can really mention in 200 kilometers. I'm assuming you already have some kind of long distance experience, maybe a century ride. If not, then at least over 100 kilometers. So everything that you've learned, every experience and skill that you've picked up in those long distance rides apply. Although I must touch on battery life though. If you're using any kind of devices or electronics that run on battery, for example, a cycling computer which you might be using for route navigation, you just want to be aware that make sure that you have enough battery life for the ride. If not, you may want to consider some kind of strategy for perhaps recharging or swapping batteries depending on the device you use. Some people's devices use AA batteries, then you might want to bring a spare or two. Or typically, if you're using, let's say, a Garmin or Wahoo or phone, then you might want to bring a USB power bank charger, such as this one that I'm using. This has a capacity of 10,000 milliamp hours or 38 watt hours. It's pretty small, almost like a phone. You can just keep it in your jersey pocket or wherever. Although for 200 kilometers, you don't really need something this big. There are smaller, tiny little ones that go for maybe 5,000 milliamps or less. Yeah, so 200 kilometers is more of an evaluation ride. So like, for example, if you're new to Randonneuring and you don't know whether it's something for you, then 200 kilometers is the first thing that you can try out to see if it's for you. Also, it's something to weed out any fit issues that might occur, because once you go past 100 kilometers, if you have no particularly significant issues like for example saddle sores, then you're good. But if you do run into issues, saddle sores especially, but also maybe things like a bad back pain or bad neck or whatever, then you might want to consider maybe visiting a professional bike fitter or something like that, and at least address your issues before you start going on longer rides. So next up is 300 kilometers. The standard cutoff time for that is 20 hours. Now, depending on how fast or slow you are, you're expected to probably finish in around, say, 15 to 18 hours, maybe 12 or less if you are really strong and fast. So everything that you've picked up from a 200 kilometer ride applies. In addition, the highlights of 300 will include things like nutrition and hydration strategies. Due to the long hours involved on the bike, you are going to expect to at least go through at least 1 or 2 meals. Now, regardless of whether you're the kind of person who likes to eat on the bike or whether you want to stop at a shop, a coffee shop or restaurant to have your meals, you need to pay attention to nutrition, since due to the distances of these kind of rides, you're at least going to go through at least lunch or dinner, maybe even both. So one thing I'd advise is to go through the route before the ride, perhaps using your favorite navigation and routing app, for example Strava or Ride with GPS, or maybe even plain old Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps, depending on which one is more reliable and up to date in your country. Now, the things you want to look for are petrol stations, convenience stores, restaurants, coffee shops, pharmacies, you know, things like that. Basically where you can stop for a rest or have food, refill your water, use the toilet, whatever. You want to see what's around the checkpoints as well as what's available along the route. Now, further down the route, you also want to pay extra attention to what's open for extended hours, or even better, what's open for 24 hours, because depending on the start time as well as how fast you ride, you are very likely to run into night riding. And of course, when you're riding at night, some shops are just going to be closed for the night, so you have to be aware of that. And speaking of night riding, you also want to make sure that your lights will last. That also means making sure you have enough power, whether that's well, maybe you're using a dynamo hub, or whether you're using AA batteries, AAA batteries, or USB charging, whatever. Just make sure that your lights will last for the duration of the ride. Now, moving on to 400 kilometers. The standard cutoff time for this kind of ride is 27 hours. And although that's like a day plus 3 more hours, I'd advise you treat it as a single day ride. So depending on the route and depending on the difficulty and how lumpy it is, as well as how fast or slow you are, expect somewhere between 20 to 24 hours for this kind of ride. Although, you know, fast people can probably do it in 16 hours or less. Regardless, night riding is almost or pretty much guaranteed, so you want to make sure that your lights are working. You want to make sure you have backups in case maybe one of your lights fail or whatever. And you of course want to make sure that you have enough charge, or at least enough batteries or charging devices to make sure your lights last throughout the entire ride. I'd also advise you to treat this as a single day ride. Now, I don't mean that you try to do it in 24 hours or less. I'd say you try to do it in a single session. Now, session basically means you aren't going to stop somewhere in mid-ride for, let's say, an extended stop. Let's say at a hotel for sleep and shower and whatnot. No, try to avoid all that. Do 400 kilometers as a single day ride. The reasons for that, I'll explain a bit later. But basically, it's essential for you to be fully comfortable with doing 400 kilometers, especially if you intend to do the more advanced, longer rides such as 1000 kilometers and above. Okay, so one last tip about 400 kilometers. Now, not everyone might be able to do the entire ride in one whole sitting. Maybe you might get sleepy or drowsy along the way. My advice is try to get used to it, and maybe employ some kind of a short nap system. You know, get used to maybe short cat naps, or maybe do a 1 or 2 hour nap somewhere at the 300 kilometer point or above. But basically, you need to try to get used to doing 400 kilometers in a day. Alright, so up next, 600 kilometers. The standard cutoff time for this kind of ride is 40 hours. Though, depending on how fast or slow you ride, it's typically a 2-day ride, maybe taking somewhere between 30 to 36 hours, with a bit of buffer there if in case you need extra time to sleep. Although there are fast people who can actually do this in 24 hours or less without sleep, but unless you are in that level of elite riding, I'd suggest you don't try it. So the main highlight of this kind of ride is that because it's a 2-day ride, there will be a midpoint where you actually maybe find a place to sleep and maybe get a shower. So this could be a hotel, a motel, a homestay, or whatever. But the idea is that you study the route beforehand, find out which checkpoint is closest to the midpoint mark, and make plans for accommodation there. So maybe you could like book a hotel earlier on beforehand, or just try your luck. Now when I say midpoint, I don't really mean exactly in the middle. In fact, there are actually 2 ways to ride a 600 kilometer brevet. Now the easy way is treating it as 2 separate 300 kilometer rides. Now since you've already done 300 kilometers, it's basically doing 2 300 kilometers back to back. Although I don't really mean exactly 300, it really depends on the location of the checkpoints and the availability of things like hotels and whatnot. So for a given ride, you might do 290 on the first day and 310 on the second day. You might even do 320 on the first day and 280 on the second day. It kind of fluctuates depending on the route and what's available. So that's the easy way, and it's something that you can do if your whole intention is just to complete the 600, or maybe you've already done 300, you haven't done a 400 yet, you've skipped ahead and do it, and you're doing a 600 before you do a 400. I actually kind of did something like that on my first attempt. So you do 300 plus 300, that's the easy way. It is not recommended if you plan on joining more advanced rides in the future though. For those, you need to treat your 600 as a 400 plus 200. And again, when I say that, I don't mean exactly 400. It depends on the route, it depends on what's available, where is civilization along the route. So it could even be as much as 440 on the first day and then 160 on the second day. Now this is the reason why I emphasized earlier that you have to be comfortable doing 400 in a single day. It's because when you start doing the even longer rides like 1000 or 1002, your 400 is basically your building block, your basic building block that builds up to these long distances. So for example, 1000 kilometers, you do it as 400, 400, and then 200. You can't split it up into 300s because 300, 300, 300, then 100 is already 4 days. You will be out of time. So 400 is the basic building block that you need to get used to if you want to do the longer rides, 1000 kilometers and above. And the 600 kilometers is basically your training ground for doing these kind of multi-day rides. Do 400, 200, then the next time you encounter another 600, you do 400, 200 again, and you just get used to doing rides like that. Then you'll be ready for the longer rides like Paris-Brest Paris or Perth Albany Perth, and anything that is 1000 and above. And that's it. If you've done 200, 300, 400 and 600 in the same Randonneuring season, congratulations, you'll be Super Randonneer for that year or season, and that qualifies you for the longer rides. So that's it for this video. If you're attempting Randonneuring this year, good luck. If you're aiming for Paris-Brest Paris, good luck also. Thank you for watching. Consider liking this video and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.